That's old stuff. That's 1950s and 60s and 70s stuff. I don't want that. You could say that. Or you could say, and wrestling aficionados and fans of my age and younger, thankfully, do say, I'm interested in the way that worked. I'm interested in the way the personalities of wrestling, the business of wrestling, the audiences of wrestling, and the wrestling itself. I'm interested in how that looked at that time. And if they are saying that, and a lot of fans are, thank goodness, they're going to love this album. Book. Sure, it looks like an album on the front, because it's got a picture of the gentleman in the bottom right, really gurning at us, angry, with those two missing bottom teeth. You'll know. He's got a little tash and a beard, bald head. Quebecer. It's Maurice Vachon. This is Mad Dog by Bertrand Hébert and Pat Laprade, and narrated by George Toombs. Very important, that narration, because you've got to get the tone right whilst keeping us excited. And actually, it's by ECW Press. Came out, when did it come out? Maybe a few years ago, and it did. 2017. But I'd heartily recommend it if you feel that you are an aficionado of wrestling. And I love the business of wrestling. And what you're going to get here is an extraordinary story. A man who went to the Olympics, who did extremely well at the Olympics, who was a gold medalist at the Olympics, a man who was small for wrestling, 5'8", a man who was a great mat wrestler, but realised he wasn't getting an enormous amount of work through that, and so decided, well, I'll just try something else, and decided to start with some attitude in the ring, and some biting, and some punching, and some stomping, and that's one of the ways he got his Mad Dog name, and who was incredibly successful in so many different ways in wrestling, and who was successful for many decades, who had 3 marriages, who had multiple grandchildren, who had a situation in wrestling that very few wrestlers have. You know, people who leave sports and all of that often struggle to acclimatise to not having the roar of the grease paint, the smell of the crowd and all of that. That wasn't the same for Maurice. Now, he didn't become the huge actor that he wanted to be. It's very clear in this book. He loved to be the centre of attention without actually making himself the centre of attention, but he wanted that crowd appreciation. And after he left wrestling, he became a bit of a TV star. In fact, a star of adverts, a star of TV shows, a comedy star. He had great timing. Tried with the WWF as an interviewer. It didn't work out, but his work on Canadian TV as a comedian, as part of a comedic show, really did work. He was really popular for a number of years. A man who had a big career after the wrestling, not as big as the wrestling, that sustained for many years. And this story, I mean, it's an extraordinary story, so it doesn't take much telling, and you don't have much authorial voice from the 2 authors and the translator. You don't have that kind of discussion about, and I think there's none of that. Story is told, not in a flat way, it's a page turner, but sometimes, if you're not interested in this, you do think, right, over to Hawaii, back to Quebec, then over to Minneapolis, and then to... You do get quite a lot of that, so the story is told in that way, but that's the only way to tell it. Why? And we're getting to the point which is my absolute interest in this book. That's the way the business was run. The NWA had a collection of promoters. Vern Gagne would be one of those in the NWA, and he worked for Vern Gagne a lot. But there were a lot of other promoters who were just on the edges of the NWA, who were only in the NWA for a while, who weren't main players in the NWA. And he really worked. He worked for so many of them. One of the things that you don't get in this book, which is a shame, is they don't push the personalities of those promoter personalities. They don't push those, and it's a shame, because the way the business worked is that even if you have your character, and he was uncompromising, Maurice Vachon, but it's very clear, beautifully soft-centred, and helped so many people, which helped him in future life. But Pat Patterson would not have been around as a wrestler if it wasn't for Maurice. It's thought so many others. He helped so many, and he was incredibly generous with his money, with his time, with his mentorship, with his contacts. But if we'd had more information about how each promoter had to be played for the business, that would have made it even more exciting. However, him moving from Texas in the winter back to Quebec in the summer, and then and then adding Hawaii and adding the AWA territories and adding Calgary, and the way he moved from territory to territory, and the way this is told, that each territory has its own particular skew and its own particular geography and its own particular interest. Beautifully done. We don't get that now. You're getting it, actually, I say that, you're getting it a bit more with smaller promotions. There are an enormous amount of indie promotions that I watch. I watch them religiously, actually. Not with a surplice and a gown and an altar set up. I don't do any of that. But what I mean is, I watch them regularly. And they do have their own particular character. So we are getting there again. But I suspect we never lost that. But the way the WWF and WWE ate up all of those territories and created a financial and business situation that saw quite a lot of the territories disappear, meant that those characters weren't there. This is a time when they absolutely were. And the differences of these territories and the way that they wanted Vachon to slightly change his character and the opportunities they gave him in different ways. That's the beauty of this book. It is wonderful. It is a really warm and lovely book. You've got a central character who needs no embellishing. He was an extraordinary wrestler, an extraordinary man. He did his own, he had an extraordinary life. He made his own opportunities. And he had a very difficult after wrestling life, health-wise and all of that. The story is there anyway, but it's the wrestling that's so important here. It's the wrestling that makes me so excited. It's the way it's done. It is absolutely great. If you like that kind of wrestling, if you like the old style feel, if you're interested in the territories, and a load of wrestlers are, I don't know if this book's been successful. Certainly I searched quite a lot to get it, and I'll be passing it on to other people, because they should read it too. It's a great read. It just shows you where wrestling has come from and where it could go back to. Here's hoping. Ta-ta.